The morning started the same way it always did. I parked in the far corner of the lot because the sun hit that side first, and I liked letting the windshield warm up while I finished my coffee. The building was quiet in that early way offices get before the day decides what kind of trouble it's going to bring. I straightened my shirt, locked the car, and walked in without thinking much about it. At 9:12 a.m., I was asked to step into the conference room. The table was already polished, lights already on. Someone had closed the blinds halfway, which always made the room feel smaller than it needed to be. I took the chair closest to the door out of habit. A few seconds later, Claire Whitman walked in. She'd been named CEO less than a month earlier. She didn't sit right away. She placed a thin folder on the table, adjusted it so the edges lined up cleanly, then finally looked at me. "We're ending your contract," she said, "effective immediately." Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't angry either. It was practiced, like a line she'd already said 3 times that morning. I nodded once and stayed quiet. She continued, eyes already drifting back down to the folder. "We're restructuring. Systems management is being brought in-house. We'll need everything handed over today so we can ensure continuity." Behind her were 2 people I hadn't met before. One from HR, holding a tablet like it was a shield. The other was younger, expensive suit, fingers already hovering over a laptop keyboard. Neither of them looked at me for long. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Claire tapped her pen once, then looked up. "We'll need full access, credentials, documentation, back-end controls, by end of business." The room went still in that uncomfortable way where everyone expects a response to land cleanly. I took a breath, slow and even. "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said. Her pen stopped mid-tap. "I'm sorry?" she asked. "The system isn't something you own," I said, "so there's nothing for me to hand over." For the first time, she really looked at me. Not annoyed yet, just surprised. "We paid for it," she said. "That makes it company property." I shook my head once. "You paid for access, not ownership." The consultant leaned toward her and whispered something. She waved him off without turning. "That's not how this works," she said, firmer now. "You can't just walk away with our infrastructure." "I'm not walking away with anything," I replied. "I'm just leaving with what was always mine." There was a pause. Not dramatic. Just long enough to feel it. She closed the folder. "We'll have legal follow-up." "I'm sure you will," I said. The meeting ended the way most of these things do. Chairs moving, polite nods, no one quite meeting anyone else's eyes. I walked out, badge already deactivated at the door. What none of them knew, what no one in that room had thought to ask, was where the system actually lived, or what happened to it when access was revoked on one side but not the other. They also didn't know about the clause Robert insisted on years earlier, or the hardware sitting quietly 15 minutes from that conference room. I didn't correct them. I drove home, put my keys on the counter, and stood there for a moment, listening to the house settle. Then I went into the garage and turned on the lights. And that's where this really starts. The garage smelled faintly of oil and warm metal, the same way it always did when I powered everything up in the morning. The lights hummed for half a second before settling. I didn't touch anything yet. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, listening to the familiar rhythm of fans and relays coming online. I'd built the core of the system years earlier, piece by piece, not as a product, as a solution to a very specific kind of problem. I'm 52 now. I've spent most of my adult life working around transportation systems that don't forgive mistakes. Early on, I learned that logistics isn't software. Software is just the skin. The real work happens underneath, where timing, physical movement, and human behavior collide. I didn't come up through tech. I came up through operations. Before any of this, I was in the service, managing supply movement where delays didn't just cost money, they created risk. After that, I spent close to a decade with a regional freight carrier, watching executives cycle through while the same people on the floor kept things running with duct tape and experience. By the time I went independent, I knew exactly what I didn't want to build. I didn't want dashboards designed for boardrooms. I didn't want tools that looked good in presentations and fell apart at scale. I wanted systems that worked quietly and didn't need explaining. That's how I met Northway Transit Group. It was almost 6 years ago. Their operations lead at the time, Daniel Park, called me late on a Thursday. No small talk, just a question. "Can you come look at something?" he asked, "because whatever we're doing isn't holding anymore." When I arrived, the problems were obvious. Trucks stacked where they shouldn't be, dispatchers improvising because the software lagged behind reality, traffic coordination stuck on fixed timing patterns that hadn't been adjusted in over a decade. No one was panicking yet. That's usually the worst phase. Daniel didn't talk much while I walked the floor. He just watched. When I finally stopped near a loading bay where two drivers were arguing over the same assignment, he nodded. "That happens every shift change," he said. "We just work around it." I spent the next year and a half building something custom, not flashy, just precise. Routing that adapted instead of assuming. Dock assignments that resolved conflicts before humans ever noticed them. Hardware that lived outside their servers and didn't depend on their IT refresh cycles or internal politics. From the beginning, the agreement was simple. They licensed access. I retained ownership. Daniel understood immediately. So did their legal team. No resistance, no pressure. The system performed. Payments arrived on time. No drama. For years, the only emails I got were quiet ones. Small optimizations, seasonal adjustments. A thank you here and there that didn't need replying to. Then Daniel retired. Claire arrived 3 weeks later. Her first email wasn't an introduction. It was a spreadsheet. Subject line, external cost review. She asked for documentation, then more documentation, then clarification around system dependencies. Her language was careful, but the direction was clear. She was mapping what she thought she could take. I responded professionally. Briefly. I attached the contract, highlighted nothing. When she asked for full system architecture, I paused longer than usual before replying. Then I went into the garage and ran diagnostics. Everything was still green, stable, quiet. I began preparing, not documentation for her, but boundaries for myself. Because when people don't understand what they're looking at, they tend to assume it's simpler than it is. And that assumption usually comes with consequences. 3 days after her final request, the termination notice arrived. And now, standing there in the garage, listening to the system breathe, I understood something clearly. They thought they'd removed a vendor. What they'd actually done was disconnect themselves. I closed the panel cover gently and went back inside. I put my phone face down on the table. Then I waited. The first message came the next morning, just before 10. It wasn't urgent. That was the interesting part. "Morning," it read. "We're having some trouble accessing the route management interface. Can you resend credentials?" No greeting, no signature, just assumption. I read it once, then again, then set the phone back down without replying. In my garage, the system indicators stayed steady. Traffic synchronization across 5 states, dock assignments cycling cleanly. Nothing unusual, nothing broken, just quietly doing what it had always done. At 9:47 a.m., another message arrived. This one from someone in operations I recognized. "Hey, quick question. Seeing a delay on routing updates. Probably nothing, but flagging it." I still didn't respond. Silence is useful when you understand timing. At 9:52, I toggled the primary relay. Not off, just disconnected. The change was immediate on my end. Data streams went flat. Live feeds froze in place. The system didn't crash. I designed it not to. It simply stopped listening and stopped speaking. From the outside, everything would still look normal for a while. Cached dashboards would continue to display green indicators. Schedules would appear intact. Anyone glancing at a screen would see stability. But underneath, nothing was coordinating anymore. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat at the small workbench near the control panel, watching. By 10:06, the first physical symptom showed up on one of the traffic cameras. A truck waiting at a light that should have cycled twice already. No adaptive timing, no correction. At 10:14, Two vehicles checked into the same loading bay at one of the northern facilities. Both drivers convinced they were assigned correctly. They were. The system that normally prevented that conflict wasn't running. Emails started arriving more frequently now, still polite, still framed as questions. Data refresh seems slow. Seeing conflicting doc assignments. Any known sync issues this morning? At 10:31, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring. At 10:34, another call. Then another. By 10:41, the tone of the emails shifted. Subject lines grew longer. Punctuation disappeared. Urgent. Routing mismatch. System not responding. Need assistance immediately. I opened one message from IT, read it carefully, closed it. They were trying to log into an interface that wasn't connected to anything real, a shell, a surface, something that looked operational but had no authority underneath it. At 11:03, I checked the impact monitor. Delays were stacking, compliance windows tightening, manual overrides multiplying across facilities. The system was designed to degrade quietly, but even quiet failures leave footprints. I started a new document. Title: Emergency Restoration Terms. I didn't rush it. I outlined scope, pricing, timeframes, conditions, everything clean, everything procedural, no emotion in the language. When I finished, I attached it to a single email addressed to Claire, legal and operations leadership. Subject line: Restoration services available. Then I sent it. At 11:22, the calls stopped. At 11:29, a calendar invite appeared. Emergency call. Immediate attendance requested. I didn't accept it yet. I let it sit on the screen while I shut down the document, closed the laptop, and stepped back into the garage. The control panel was quiet, waiting. I rested my hand on the edge of the bench and stood there for a moment, listening to nothing at all. Then I went back inside and accepted the invite. The call was scheduled for 12. I had time. I joined the call 2 minutes early. Camera on, neutral background, clean shirt. The same setup I used for routine check-ins back when things were calm. I didn't want anything about my appearance to suggest urgency or tension. When the screen populated, I counted faces quietly. 3 executives I recognized by title, not by voice. 2 attorneys, 1 operations manager I'd worked with before, and Claire, muted, sitting very still in the lower corner of the screen. No one smiled. "Thank you for joining on such short notice," one of the attorneys began. "We're experiencing a significant operational disruption." I nodded once. Nothing else. He continued. "We believe this may be related to the transition process following the termination of your contract." "I believe it is," I said. There was a pause. Someone cleared their throat. The operations manager leaned closer to his camera. "We've got routing conflicts across multiple facilities. Dispatch can't reconcile assignments. Drivers are calling in confused." "I understand," I said. Claire unmuted. "This didn't have to happen," she said. Her voice was controlled but tight. "We expected cooperation during the transition." "You terminated access," I replied. "That was your decision." One of the attorneys stepped in quickly. "We're not here to debate intent. We're here to restore operations. Can you assist?" "Yes," I said, "under specific terms." I shared my screen. The document was simple. No branding, no commentary, just structure. "Emergency Restoration Services," I said, reading the title once. "This outlines what's required." I didn't explain the pricing. I didn't justify it. Silence followed while they read. "This rate is substantial," the second attorney said carefully. "It reflects urgency," I replied, "and priority." Claire shook her head slightly. "You're leveraging a crisis." "I'm responding to one," I said. "There's a difference." The operations manager spoke again. "If we meet the terms, how long until systems are fully operational?" 30 minutes from confirmation, I said. End to end. That got their attention. Someone asked if partial restoration was possible. I said no. Someone suggested installments. I said no. Then I laid it out, calmly. Not as a threat, as a process. "Step 1, I said, payment clears, wire transfer only. Step 2, written acknowledgement of system ownership and licensing boundaries. Step 3. Restoration begins immediately. No embellishment, no emotion. The room went quiet again, this time longer. Claire looked down. She didn't speak. "We need time to review internally," the first attorney said. "I'll stay on the line," I replied. They muted themselves and disappeared into a breakout room. I sat back in my chair and waited. While they talked, I checked the system monitor on my second screen. Delays were spreading, manual overrides stacking up. Nothing catastrophic yet. But the slope was steep. After 8 minutes, they returned. The lead executive spoke this time. His voice was different now, slower, measured. "Finance is initiating the transfer," he said. "We'll notify you once it's complete." "Good," I replied. No one asked Claire to speak. We ended the call without ceremony. I closed the laptop and walked into the garage. The panel lights were steady, dormant but ready. I didn't touch anything yet. I checked my phone once, then set it down again. And I waited for the only confirmation that mattered. The notification came in quietly. No ringtone, no vibration. Just a soft chime from my phone on the kitchen counter. "Incoming wire transfer, amount confirmed." I looked at the number once, then locked the screen. In the garage, the air was cool and still. I sat down in front of the control panel and rested both hands on my knees for a moment, not because I needed to, because I always paused before bringing systems online, habit from years of working with things that didn't forgive carelessness. I flipped the relay. Indicators came back one by one. Not all at once. They never did. Each subsystem reconnected in sequence, checking state, syncing clocks, re-establishing handshakes. Route calculations resumed, traffic nodes adjusted, dock assignments reconciled themselves without fanfare. Within minutes, everything was moving again. I walked back inside and rejoined the call. They were all still there, waiting. "Systems are operational," I said. "All services restored." No applause, no relief expressed out loud. Just a collective exhale I could almost feel through the screen. "Thank you," the executive said. "We appreciate the quick resolution." "This followed the terms," I replied. Nothing more. Claire finally spoke. Her voice was flatter now, less certain. "We'll need to discuss long-term arrangements." "That can wait," I said. "For now, you have access, within the boundaries outlined." No one argued. I left the call without saying goodbye. For the next 2 days, I monitored quietly, not obsessively, just enough to confirm stability. Everything ran the way it always had. Clean logs, no conflicts, no anomalies. There were no messages from Claire. On the third morning, an email arrived from someone new. Head of Strategic Operations. Different tone, different language. They acknowledged ownership explicitly. Proposed revised terms, longer horizon, clearer boundaries. No mention of what had happened, no attempt to reframe it. I read it once. Then again. I opened a blank document and started rewriting the agreement. Slower this time. Tighter. Every clause intentional, no assumptions left open. 3 weeks later, the signed contract came back exactly as I'd written it. No red lines, no commentary. Claire's name wasn't on it. That afternoon, I went into the garage, powered everything down for routine maintenance, and cleaned the bench, wiped away dust, reorganized tools. The system hummed back to life when I was done. Steady, quiet, under control. I locked the door and went inside. The house felt calm again. And that was enough. The next few days passed without much noise. No follow-up calls, no questions disguised as check-ins, no late-night emails asking for clarification. The system ran the way it always had. Quietly, predictably, without asking for attention. That's usually how you know boundaries have landed. On Monday morning, I reviewed the logs over breakfast. Coffee cooling beside me. Toast untouched. Everything looked clean. Latency back within normal range. No manual overrides lingering. Compliance markers reset and stable. They hadn't tried to push. That mattered. Around mid-morning, a new message came in. Different sender, different title block. Patricia Lowell, Executive Vice President, Operations Strategy. Her email didn't reference the outage, didn't mention the termination. Didn't use words like misunderstanding or transition challenges. It was short. She thanked me for restoring operations, acknowledged that the company had mischaracterized ownership boundaries, stated clearly that they wanted to move forward with mutual clarity. Attached was a revised proposal. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I went back into the garage and sat on the stool near the control panel. The soft ticking of cooling metal filled the space. I'd learned over the years not to rush decisions when systems were stable. Stability is a good time to think. When I finally opened the attachment, I read it slowly. 5-year term, exclusive engagement, expanded scope, clear acknowledgement that all system architecture, hardware, and logic remained mine. No language that could be interpreted later, no soft verbs, no room for ambiguity. They were correcting something. Carefully. I didn't respond that day. That night, I printed the document and marked it up by hand. Not dramatically, just tightening where language drifted, removing anything that depended on goodwill instead of structure. The next morning, I sent back my version. No explanation, just the file. 3 weeks passed. When the signed copy returned, every clause was intact, exactly as written. No edits, no side letters. The signature block listed Patricia Lowell, General Counsel, CFO. Claire Whitman wasn't anywhere on it. I closed the laptop and stood up. My back ached slightly, the way it does when you've been sitting too long with something finished but not yet set down. In the garage, I powered down the system for scheduled maintenance. Replaced a fan that had been running a little warm, reseated a cable I'd been meaning to adjust. Then I brought everything back online, green across the board. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood. Nothing special, just the sound of traffic a few streets over, someone mowing a lawn, the kind of normal that only feels noticeable after disorder passes. When I got home, I filed the new contract, cleaned the kitchen, and made tea. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled, and for someone like me, that's the point where things are resolved. I put the phone face down on the counter. Then I went about the rest of my day. A few weeks later, life settled into its normal rhythm. Mornings were quiet again. Coffee first. A quick systems check out of habit, not concern. The panel lights in the garage became background noise, the way a refrigerator hum disappears once you trust it's working. That's how I like things. One evening, I found myself reorganizing a drawer that hadn't needed attention in years. Old cables, spare adapters, a notebook from a past project I barely remembered. I threw nothing away until I'd looked at it twice. Another habit. When you build systems for a living, you learn that what looks obsolete often just hasn't been needed yet. I thought about how close that situation had come to becoming something louder, lawyers posturing, meetings stretching on, voices rising. It never went there, not because I fought, because I didn't need to. The truth had already been written down years earlier, signed, filed, followed. All I had to do was let it speak when the time came. A few days after that, an email came in from a logistics director in another city. We'd never met. He said he'd been given my name by someone who thought I might understand a delicate situation. No details, no urgency, just a quiet request to talk. I didn't answer right away. I finished what I was doing, closed the drawer, washed my mug, let the house go still again. There seems to be a pattern with these things. People don't reach out when everything is working. They reach out when someone with authority mistakes access for ownership or speed for understanding. I'll talk to him, eventually. For now, things are in order. The system runs, the contract is clear, the garage is clean, and the work continues the way it always has, quietly, without needing an audience. If you stayed with me through this, thanks for listening. If you found this story familiar in any way, you're probably not alone. Feel free to like the video if it helped you settle in, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Go ahead and leave a comment too. Tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read more of those than you might expect. 2 popular stories will be queued up for you next. Take whichever one feels right. Thanks for spending part of your day here.